Hello everybody, Andrew Blake from the digitalaudiomanual.com. Today let's talk about the project browser in Cubase. But before we start, I want to remind you that there's a link below to the Content Navigation Guide, which is an easy-to-navigate web page with links to all the content on this channel. And besides that, in the near future, I'm going to begin adding tips and other bits of information that will only be available there. If you're working with programs like Wavelab or Cubase Plugins or the Cable Guys Shaperbox and many other projects that are in the works, then I know you're going to find, just like I have, that this is an invaluable study aid. And the other thing I want to make sure you understand is that this is not a simple PDF. This is a constantly updated page that has any information that is new, or anytime videos are changed, really anything updated. And once you have it, you will always have the latest information constantly updated. So if you haven't gotten it already, go to the link below, click on it, and save it to your favorites. It's my gift to you. Okay, so let's get started. So the project browser. It's basically something that allows you to see everything that's happening in your project. We're looking at the project browser. Let me close it out. You can see I have tracks of various things, maybe effects, maybe automation, all the things that would be in a project. I want to open up the project browser, so I go up to the menu that says project, go down to where it says browser and click on that. And in a second or two, I'm looking at the project browser. What can we do with the project browser? Let's examine this. One thing that's fascinating and fun to look at right away is how you can see every little bit of data in your project. On the left, as I start moving down this list of various things, anything I click on gets also reflected over here in the track inspector area. For example, I hit this bass track, and it selects the bass track down here. Hit the kick, and then it selects the kick down here. And you get this total bird's eye view of everything happening. For example, maybe there's some automation in your track. If I come down, I can see a little folder here, and it says automation. There's a plus sign by it. I can click that. And right here, I can see all the little automation bits. If I click on any of these audio tracks, I can get specific information on the data that's happening on the track. I can open up some of these folders and see what's in the folders. A real fun and informative way to view your project and just see everything that's in here in kind of a list view. So as we look around this list, over on the left we have the project structure, which again shows you everything that's happening in the project. Up on the top we have some kind of toolbar. Below that we have an info line, tells us some of the things when we click on it. Then we have the event display, which gives us details of whatever we've clicked on. Up on top, you have these master plus and minus keys. One will open up all of your folders if you need to resize the window to see them all, and one will close all the folders. Moving over to the right, we have the time format. Allows us to see everything in bars and beats or seconds or time code or anything else. You're looking at something specific, like right here I have this audio sample showing the measures of where it is in the project. But if I start changing the time format, for example, if I change it to seconds, then the display will show seconds instead of bars and beats. The reason things change, depending on what I click in this project structure area, is because there's an option up here on the right that says sync the selection. If I uncheck that, then I can independently make choices. So one of the first ways to get acquainted with this is look at this project structure window and the fact that we have everything listed. We can click on any topic, and then depending on whatever we click on, we get different results over here in the display. So if I start right at the top and I click Project Browser, I get all kinds of different track types over here. And then if I move down the list, this next option says all the tracks. It gets more specific, showing what tracks I have. As I hit certain folders, it shows what's in that folder. Really interesting to just kind of explore through it. Clicking on the various topic and seeing what shows up in the display over here. Of course, you can hit these plus signs to open things up. As you go down the list, in the tracks and in the folders, you'll see things that say the track data. That'll let you see if there's anything actually recorded on the track. Hit an automation lane and there's something recorded. In this track, I have some automation. As I look down the list, if I click on the automation, click on the actual volume, then I can see the automation data, specifically all written out. I go to this bass track, which has these different events. I can see these separate events over here. If you want to move some of these categories around, you can click on them and drag them to a different area. On any of these files, if you want to change their names, you can double click on them. This is convenient. Instead of going up into the info line sometimes or down into the events, depending on what kind of event or part it is, you can actually double click on these pictures, and that will open it up in the editor. If it's a MIDI part, it'll open up in the key editor. If it's an audio part, it opens up in the sample editor. If you need to move things around to start or end positions, you can click on those and change the volume by clicking on it. If you want to get creative and change some of the offset times, you can hold Control and click multiple parts. You can come over and hit the mute option. In all these kind of list-based editors, one of the things they're really good for is helping you to identify maybe extraneous data that you may not normally see or know that it's in your track or your project. And then you can click on that data, whatever it is, or multiples of that data. And then you can hit delete or backspace and remove that. One way to approach the project browser to be able to learn what it offers and see some of its features in action. Any project that you have, go up to the top, hit this expand all button, which completely opens up every folder for you. And then go to the very bottom of the list, click on your first option at the very bottom, and use your up arrow and kind of click up through the different pieces of information and observe what you see over here on the right in the display. And you begin to understand what data is available here, what data it's going to show. And then another thing you're going to see, you look at the very, very top up here, you're going to see these empty fields. One over here says filter. Right now in this example, it's completely blank. If I continue with my arrow moving upwards, for example, I hit on markers. And the minute I did that, 3 little dots appeared. If I go over to the down arrow now, I see that it's giving me the option to see if I have regular markers or cycle markers. And if it's on the 3 dots, it's showing me both the cycles and the regular markers. If I hit the regular markers, it filters out everything but the regular markers. And if I go to cycle markers, then it shows me only the cycle markers. There is no other view in Cubase that allows you to quickly see information like this. You can easily use your mouse wheel over this and just spin through these different options, filtering what you want to see. And then if you go a little bit more to the left, you get a drop-down arrow. And again, depending on what kind of information you're looking at, you'll have the option to add more of it. For example, I can add more markers, or I can add more cycle markers. If I'm on markers, I can click this add button, and I can quickly add a bunch of extra markers. If I change this drop down to cycle markers, I can quickly hit the add button and add a bunch of cycle markers. And then once again, come over to the filter area and filter out whatever I want to see, and then I can refine them if I need to. If I go back to my arrows and I continue up my list a little further, for example, when I come to this track that has note values on it, again, I'll see these 3 dots appear in the filter area. It shows the notes in the display. At this point, I can go to the add area, and in this drop-down, I can pick any number of things that I want to add more of. Let's go to controller. I'll hit a bunch of controllers. Program changes, add a bunch of extra program changes. Some aftertouch data, add a bunch of those. Pitch bend data, system exclusive, and some text. Now, if I hit on a track that actually had all this information, which many tracks could, it's not unusual for a track to have a bunch of notes, controller, and pitch bend, and any number of these other options. Then again, I can go over to this filter drop-down list, and I can quickly just spin through the different filters and see exactly what's available on that track. If at some point I decide there's something that I don't need, or I think it might be messing up my track, for example, all these program changes, maybe I don't need these program changes. I could then just select all these program changes, and then I could hit the delete key. I know I've taken those out of my track. So the best way to use this project browser is just spend some time clicking on various things in a project that you have. Use your arrow keys to go up and down, and just become acquainted with all the data that you have in any particular project. Then you'll have a whole other way you can change or use your data when certain things come up that you may need to do. All right, it's going to wrap it up for today. As always, if you haven't already, be sure to grab your copy of the Digital Audio Manual Content Navigation Guide from the link below this video. It's the faster, better way to learn and review. Pick it up, look it over, all the different topics that are gathered there, and then you too can get started on your path to a better way to learn all this stuff. So we looked at the project browser, another one of these list-based editors in Cubase. My feeling on all of these kind of editors is get to know them, get comfortable with them, and then use them when you need them. We looked at how to open up the project browser. We saw how the list view can reflect the project. We looked at the different zones, how to sync the selections, the project structure. We saw how to expand and arrow through those different folders. We saw what data shows up. We saw some examples with markers and notes and learned how to filter that data out. And we're going to continue to move through all these different features and functions in Cubase. As always, it's great to have you guys here, and I'll see you on the next video.